The moment that shattered Simone's world came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. She had arrived home early from picking up their daughter Zoe from kindergarten, the little girl now happily coloring in her room. Simone walked into Brandon's home office to leave some mail on his desk when she noticed papers scattered across the surface. The header read, "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage." Her hands trembled as she picked up the document. This had to be a mistake. They had their problems like any couple, but divorce? They had never even discussed it. Her eyes scanned the pages, each word cutting deeper than the last. Brandon was demanding the house. Their house. The one she had decorated, where she had brought Zoe home as a newborn, where every room held memories of the family she thought they were building. He wanted both cars even though one was technically in her name. He was claiming their entire savings account, the one she had contributed to equally throughout their 8-year marriage. But nothing prepared her for what came next. There, in black and white, was a detailed list of demands. He wanted her grandmother's jewelry collection, pieces that had been passed down through 3 generations of women in her family. He wanted the artwork they had collected together. He wanted reimbursement for expenses he claimed to have covered alone. The list went on for pages, each item another piece of their shared life he was ready to tear away. Then she reached the custody section. Her breath caught in her throat. Under minor children, he had written just one word, none requested. Simone read it again, certain she had misunderstood. None requested. He was not asking for custody of Zoe. Not joint custody. Not visitation. Nothing. As if their 6-year-old daughter simply did not exist in his future plans. Her legs gave out and she sank into Brandon's leather desk chair. This was the same man who had cried when Zoe was born. The same man who had held her tiny hand in the hospital and promised to always protect her. Now he was erasing her from his life like she was a bad investment. Simone's shock turned to a desperate need for answers. She opened Brandon's laptop, knowing his password was still Zoe's birthday. His email was open, and there in the inbox was a thread with someone named Tiffany. Her stomach turned as she began reading. The messages went back 2 years. 2 years of "I miss you," and "can't wait to see you this weekend." 2 years of Brandon living a double life. But it was a message from 3 weeks ago that made Simone's blood run cold. Tiffany had written, "I'm so excited about us finally being together full time. I can't wait to start our real family. What about your daughter though?" Brandon's response was casual, almost dismissive. "Zoe isn't part of my future plans. She's been more of a burden than anything. Simone can have her. I just want what I've earned and to start fresh with you. We'll have our own kids, ones we actually planned for." Simone read the words 3 times, each reading making them more real and more horrifying. Burden. Not part of his future plans. Start fresh. Her daughter, their daughter, reduced to an inconvenience he was ready to discard. She scrolled further and found messages where Brandon complained about having to spend time with Zoe on weekends. Messages where he told Tiffany he regretted having a child so young. Messages where he discussed their future together, a future that included a big house, travel, and eventually children. "We both want." There were photos too. Brandon and Tiffany at restaurants Simone recognized, places he had told her were business dinners. Brandon and Tiffany on a beach somewhere tropical, during a supposed work conference. Brandon and Tiffany looking at engagement rings. Simone's phone buzzed. A text from Brandon, "Working late again. Don't wait up." She looked at the timestamp on his last email to Tiffany, sent 15 minutes ago from his office. He wasn't working late. He was planning a life without them. From down the hall, Simone heard Zoe singing to herself, a cheerful melody about butterflies and rainbows. The pure innocence of that sound against the harsh reality of what Simone had just discovered was almost too much to bear. How could she tell her daughter that her father didn't want her? How could she explain that the man Zoe loved unconditionally saw her as nothing more than a burden? Simone's initial devastation began transforming into something else. As she sat in that office, surrounded by evidence of Brandon's betrayal, a cold clarity settled over her. He thought he could take everything and leave her with nothing but their child, as if Zoe was the consolation prize he was graciously letting her keep. He had no idea that Zoe was everything. And he had no idea what he had just started. Architected narrative momentum for revenge storyline continuation. Good start. The hook is long and captures the most unsettling part, the husband not wanting his own child and calling her a burden. Now I need to continue with the remaining chapters, keeping each around 1,000 words. Let me continue with chapter 2. Simone printed every email, every text message, every photo. She created a folder on a flash drive with all the evidence, then carefully closed everything on Brandon's computer. She would not confront him yet. She would not cry or scream or beg. She had learned from her grandmother that when someone shows you who they really are, you believe them the first time. Brandon came home after midnight, reeking of perfume that wasn't Simone's. She pretended to be asleep. He slipped into bed beside her like nothing was wrong, like he hadn't just filed papers to destroy their family and abandon his own daughter. That night, Simone lay awake making plans. Brandon wanted everything in the divorce. Well, she would make sure he got exactly what he deserved. Nothing. The next morning, Simone dropped Zoe at school and drove straight to the offices of Carter and Associates. She had not seen Jerome Carter since their college days at Howard University, but she knew he had become one of the most successful divorce attorneys in the state. She had followed his career from a distance, proud of her old friend who had overcome poverty to build an empire helping people navigate the worst moments of their lives. The receptionist tried to tell her Jerome was booked solid, but Simone wrote a note and asked her to deliver it. 5 minutes later, Jerome himself appeared in the lobby. He had aged well. The skinny kid from their chemistry study group had grown into a commanding presence in an impeccable navy suit. But his eyes still held the warmth she remembered, and when he saw her face, his professional smile faded into genuine concern. "Simone Washington," he said softly. "I heard you got married. Took your husband's last name." "Anderson," she corrected. "Simone Anderson. For now." He led her back to his office, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She handed him the flash drive without preamble. "I need the best lawyer in this city," she said. "I need someone who will fight like everything depends on it. Because it does." Jerome plugged in the drive and began reading. She watched his expression shift from neutral professionalism to barely contained anger. When he reached the messages about Zoe, his jaw tightened. "He called his own daughter a burden," Jerome said quietly. "It wasn't a question. Among other things." Jerome closed the laptop and looked at her directly. "I'm going to ask you something and I need complete honesty. Did you come here because you want to save your marriage or because you want to destroy him?" "I want justice," Simone replied. "I want my daughter protected. I want what's mine. And I want him to understand that you don't throw away your family and walk away clean." "Then you came to the right place." Jerome opened a fresh legal pad. "Tell me everything. And I mean everything. Every asset, every account, every piece of property. When did you get married? What did you bring into the marriage? What does he do for work? Leave nothing out." For the next 3 hours, Simone told him everything. She explained how she had met Brandon 9 years ago at a young professionals networking event. How he had been charming and ambitious, working as a junior consultant at a mid-level firm. How they had married after a year of dating, and she had gotten pregnant with Zoe almost immediately. "I had just finished my MBA," Simone explained. "I was offered a position at a Fortune 500 company. But Brandon was starting his own consulting business and he needed help. He convinced me to postpone my career and work with him instead." "Did you get paid?" Jerome asked. "He said we would split everything 50-50 once the business was profitable. I managed the entire operations side while he handled client relations. I built all the systems, hired the first employees, managed the finances." "And did you split it 50-50? Simone shook her head. "The business is in his name only. He said it was for tax purposes." I believed him. Jerome made notes, his pen moving quickly. "What else?" "When we bought the house, I put down the entire down payment. $60,000 from my inheritance when my grandmother passed. Brandon said his credit was better so the mortgage should be in his name." Again I believed him. "The cars?" "Both bought with joint funds but both in his name." "The savings account?" "Joint account. We each contributed equally. Last time I checked, there was about $120,000 in it." Jerome looked up sharply. "When was the last time you checked?" "Maybe 3 months ago." "Why?" He turned his laptop around to show her the bank records he had pulled up using the account information she had provided. The balance showed $15,000. Simone felt the room tilt. "Where did it go?" "That's what we're going to find out." Jerome made more notes. "I'm going to need you to sign some authorizations so I can subpoena bank records, business accounts, credit card statements. If he moved money, we'll find it." Over the next week, Jerome worked with forensic accountants to trace every dollar. What they discovered made Simone's initial heartbreak turn into cold fury. Brandon had been systematically draining their accounts for the past year. He had transferred $85,000 to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. He had used $20,000 in marital funds to buy Tiffany a car. Another $15,000 had gone to a down payment on a condo he was purchasing in Tiffany's name. But the most calculated betrayal was what Jerome discovered in Brandon's communications with his own attorney. Brandon had been planning to claim Zoe wasn't his biological daughter. He had drafted arguments suggesting Simone had been unfaithful, that he had doubts about paternity, and that he should not be responsible for child support. "It's complete nonsense," Jerome said, showing her the emails. "But if you didn't have proof otherwise, it could have created enough doubt to reduce his child support obligations." "I have proof," Simone said quietly. She pulled out her phone and showed Jerome photos she had found in Brandon's own files. DNA test results from when Zoe was 2 years old. Brandon had ordered the test himself during a period when they were arguing about having a second child. The results showed a 99.9% probability that he was Zoe's father. "He knew," Simone whispered. "He knew she was his, and he was still going to lie about it in court." Jerome looked at the documents, then at Simone. "This man is not just leaving you. He's trying to destroy you financially and emotionally. He wants you to have nothing and no one to turn to. He wants to walk away with everything while making you look like the bad guy. What do we do?" Jerome smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "We show him what happens when you underestimate Simone Washington. You built his business. You managed his money. You created the foundation for everything he has. Now we're going to take it all back, and we're going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man abandons his own daughter." Simone spent the next 2 weeks living in a strange state of dual existence. During the day, she maintained the facade of normalcy. She packed Zoe's lunches, helped with homework, attended parent-teacher conferences. She smiled when Brandon came home late, accepted his excuses without question, and asked nothing about his whereabouts. But every moment he was out of the house, she was working. Jerome had given her specific instructions. Document everything, change nothing, and under no circumstances let Brandon know she was aware of his plans. "Right now, he thinks you're going to be blindsided," Jerome had explained. "He thinks when he serves you papers, you'll be so devastated that you'll sign whatever he puts in front of you. We need him to keep thinking that." So Simone played the role of the oblivious wife while she and Jerome built their case. She photographed every piece of her grandmother's jewelry, every valuable in the house. She made copies of insurance policies, property deeds, and investment statements. She found the original receipts showing she had paid for the house down payment. Most importantly, she documented every lie Brandon told about his whereabouts and cross-referenced it with evidence of where he actually was. The business dinner in Chicago that was actually a weekend with Tiffany in the Bahamas. The conference in Seattle that was a ski trip to Colorado. The late nights at the office that were dinners at expensive restaurants. Jerome's forensic accountants discovered that Brandon had been even more thorough in his deception than they first realized. He had created a shell company and was funneling money from his legitimate business into it. That shell company was purchasing assets in Tiffany's name, effectively hiding marital property. "He's been planning this for at least 18 months, Jerome told Simone during one of their strategy sessions. "Everything is calculated. The offshore accounts, the shell company, the timing of when he started moving money. He probably has been working with his attorney for over a year. Can we stop him? Better than that. We can undo all of it. Every fraudulent transfer, every hidden asset, every lie. But I need to know something, Simone. How far are you willing to go?" "What do you mean?" Jerome leaned forward. "I can file a standard counter-petition. We fight for a fair split, we argue for child support, we move on. That's the clean, quiet route. Or we can go nuclear. We expose every lie, every fraud, every bit of his cruelty. We make this public. We make him face consequences not just in court but in his professional and personal life. But that route gets messy. It gets ugly. And it requires you to be prepared for him to fight back hard." Simone thought of Zoe, bright and trusting, who still asked every night when Daddy would be home to read her a story. She thought of the little girl who had no idea her father was planning to erase her from his life. She thought of all the other women who might fall for Brandon's charm, who might build businesses with him or have children with him, never knowing what kind of man he truly was. "Nuclear," she said firmly. "I want everyone to know exactly who Brandon Anderson is." That night, Brandon came home at 10 p.m., smelling like wine and perfume. He found Simone in the kitchen, packing Zoe's lunch for the next day. "Hey babe," he said casually, as if he hadn't just spent the evening with another woman. "Sorry I'm late. Client dinner ran long." "No problem," Simone replied, her voice steady. "There's leftovers in the fridge if you're hungry." He kissed her cheek and she forced herself not to pull away. He went upstairs to shower and she heard him on the phone, his voice low and intimate. Talking to Tiffany, no doubt, telling her how his wife suspected nothing. Simone finished packing the lunch and looked around the kitchen. This house, which Brandon was trying to take from her, had been her dream home. She had chosen every paint color, every piece of furniture, every detail. She had made it a home for their family. He thought he could just take it. Take everything. Leave her with nothing but the daughter he saw as a burden. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jerome, documents ready. We file tomorrow at 9 a.m. Simone smiled. Tomorrow, Brandon would find out that his carefully constructed plan was about to collapse. Tomorrow, the man who thought he was so clever, so strategic, so untouchable, would learn what it meant to underestimate the woman he married. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. Brandon received the counterpetition at his office on a Friday afternoon. Simone knew the exact moment because Jerome had arranged for process servers to deliver it while Brandon was in a meeting with his entire team. According to Jerome's investigator, who had been monitoring the situation, Brandon had gone pale reading the first page. He had excused himself from the meeting and locked himself in his private office for 2 hours. His assistant reported hearing him making angry phone calls. Simone was at home when her phone started ringing. First Brandon's mother, then his sister, then his business partner. All asking variations of the same question. Was it true? She didn't answer any of them. Instead, she sat down with Zoe to make dinner, helping her daughter stir pasta sauce while the phone rang and rang. Why isn't Daddy coming home for dinner? Zoe asked, her small face scrunched in concentration as she stirred. Daddy has to work late, sweetheart, Simone said, smoothing her daughter's hair. But we can have a special girls' night. How about we watch a movie after dinner? Can we watch the one with the princess who saves herself? Simone smiled despite everything. That's my favorite kind of princess story. Brandon didn't come home that night. Or the next. He sent a text saying he was staying with a friend and they needed space to think. Simone knew he was actually at the condo he had purchased for Tiffany. Let him hide. The court didn't care where he slept. What the court did care about was the evidence Jerome had filed along with the counterpetition. Not just the counterpetition itself, which demanded return of all marital assets, reimbursement for fraudulent transfers and substantial child support, but also supporting documentation that became part of the public record. The offshore accounts. The shell company. The purchases made in Tiffany's name with marital funds. The emails discussing how to hide money and avoid child support. The text messages where Brandon called his daughter a burden. All of it, neatly organized and properly documented, available for anyone who wanted to look up the case. And people were looking. Brandon's business was built on reputation. He consulted for family-owned companies, helping them with succession planning and generational wealth management. His entire brand was about family values and building legacies. Now his clients could see that he was abandoning his own daughter and committing financial fraud against his wife. The first client cancellation came on Monday, then 2 more on Tuesday. By Wednesday, Brandon's business partner called an emergency meeting. Simone knew all of this because Jerome had connections everywhere. One of Brandon's junior associates, disgusted by what he had read in the court filings, had started quietly feeding information to Jerome's office. The associate had a daughter the same age as Zoe, and the text messages where Brandon called his child a burden had struck a nerve. Brandon tried to claim you fabricated the messages, Jerome told Simone during their Wednesday meeting. But I had our digital forensics team verify everything. They're authentic and we can prove it. His attorney knows it too. They're in crisis mode. Good, Simone said. There's more. Tiffany is starting to realize what she got herself into. Our investigator followed her to 3 different law offices yesterday. She's looking for her own attorney. Why would she need an attorney? Jerome pulled up some documents on his computer. Because the condo Brandon bought in her name? It's technically a fraudulent transfer of marital assets. We can force the sale and reclaim that money for you. Same with the car he bought her. Tiffany is starting to understand that being the other woman comes with legal consequences. Simone felt a grim satisfaction. She had no sympathy for Tiffany. The woman had knowingly carried on with a married man, had encouraged him to abandon his daughter, had benefited financially from stolen marital funds. If Tiffany was suffering now, it was her own choices that brought her here. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out. In the meantime, the court had frozen all accounts and assets, preventing Brandon from moving any more money. He was still living at the condo with Tiffany, but according to the investigator, the atmosphere there was tense. Brandon's attempts to reach Simone had gone from angry to desperate. He left voicemails claiming she was destroying his life over one mistake. He sent emails saying they could work this out if she would just be reasonable. His mother showed up at the house begging Simone to drop the case. "Boys make mistakes," Brandon's mother had said, standing on the porch. "You're going to destroy his career over this. Think about Zoe. She needs her father." Simone had looked at the older woman calmly. "Your son abandoned Zoe before I filed anything. He chose to throw away his family. I'm just making sure Zoe and I are protected. If that destroys his career, maybe he should have thought about that before committing fraud and adultery." She had closed the door on Brandon's mother's sputtering protests. The truth was, Simone was not destroying Brandon's career. He had done that himself. Every client who left, every colleague who gave him the cold shoulder, every friend who stopped returning his calls, those were natural consequences of his own actions becoming public knowledge. People didn't want to work with a man who abandoned his daughter. They didn't want to trust their business to someone who committed fraud. They didn't want to associate with a person who could lie so easily to the woman he promised to cherish. Brandon had built his reputation on being trustworthy and family-oriented. Now everyone knew it was a facade. And facades, once exposed, could never be rebuilt. Simone focused on what mattered: Zoe. Her daughter knew mommy and daddy were having grown-up problems, but Simone made sure Zoe felt loved and secure. They established new routines, new traditions. Saturday morning pancakes. Sunday afternoon art projects. Weeknight story time that didn't depend on whether daddy showed up. "Is daddy mad at us?" Zoe asked one evening as Simone was tucking her into bed. "Daddy is dealing with adult stuff," Simone said carefully. "But nothing is your fault, baby girl. You are perfect exactly as you are. Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices, but that has nothing to do with you. You hear me?" Zoe nodded solemnly. "I hear you, Mommy. I love you more than anything in this whole world." "More than chocolate?" Simone laughed. "Even more than chocolate." As she left Zoe's room, Simone felt the weight of responsibility settle over her. She was fighting this battle not for revenge, though she would be lying if she said there wasn't satisfaction in watching Brandon face consequences. She was fighting because Zoe deserved a mother who would stand up when someone tried to tear their family apart. She was fighting because no man should be able to abandon his child and walk away with everything. She was fighting because sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to make sure the people who try to destroy it pay the full price. The preliminary hearing arrived on a cold morning in February. Simone dressed carefully in a navy suit that struck the perfect balance between professional and sympathetic. Jerome had coached her extensively on courtroom demeanor: calm, composed, factual. Let the evidence speak. Don't get emotional even when the other side tries to provoke you. Brandon arrived with his attorney, Richard Moss, a man known for aggressive tactics and expensive fees. Brandon wore his best charcoal suit and an expression of wounded dignity, as if he were the victim in all this. Tiffany was conspicuously absent. The courtroom was smaller than Simone expected, with wood paneling and fluorescent lights that made everything look harsh. Judge Patricia Morrison presided, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair and a reputation for no-nonsense rulings. Brandon's attorney went first, painting a picture of a successful businessman blindsided by a vindictive wife. According to Moss, Brandon was willing to be generous in the settlement despite Simone's unreasonable demands and public campaign to destroy his reputation. "My client is a respected business owner who has worked tirelessly to build a successful company," Moss argued. "He has made mistakes in his personal life, yes, but those mistakes do not justify Ms. Washington's attempts to take everything he has worked for." Simone noticed Moss kept calling her Ms. Washington instead of Mrs. Anderson, subtly implying the marriage was already over. She kept her expression neutral. When it was Jerome's turn, he stood and approached the bench with a file folder. "Your Honor, I'm going to present evidence that tells a very different story. This is not a case of a vindictive wife. This is a case of systematic fraud, financial abuse, and parental abandonment." Jerome methodically presented the evidence. The offshore accounts, the shell company, the forged documents, the timeline of asset transfers that began 18 months before Brandon filed for divorce. Every point was backed up with bank records, emails, and sworn statements. "Mr. Anderson didn't just have an affair, Your Honor. He planned and executed a financial strategy designed to leave his wife destitute while hiding marital assets for his own benefit. And most disturbingly, he has attempted to abandon his parental responsibilities to his 6-year-old daughter." Jerome pulled out the printed text messages, the ones where Brandon called Zoe a burden and said she wasn't part of his future plans. He read them aloud in the courtroom, his voice steady but the words devastating. Simone watched Brandon's face as his own words were read back. He looked down at the table, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Even his attorney shifted uncomfortably. Judge Morrison interrupted. "Mr. Moss, does your client dispute the authenticity of these messages?" Moss stood reluctantly. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges he wrote those words in a moment of stress and poor judgment. However, he maintains that his feelings have evolved and—" "Has your client filed for any custody of the minor child?" "Not at this time, but—" "Has he requested visitation?" "The situation is complicated. It's a yes or no question, Counselor. Has your client requested any form of custody or visitation with his daughter?" Moss looked at Brandon, who shook his head slightly. "No, Your Honor." Judge Morrison made a note. "Continue, Mr. Carter." Jerome presented the business records next, showing how Simone had built the operational framework for Brandon's consulting company. Ms. Washington has an MBA from Howard University. She postponed her own career to help Mr. Anderson launch his business. She created all the operational systems, managed finances, and worked full-time without compensation for the first 3 years. The business is valued at approximately $1.2 million. Mr. Anderson claims sole ownership, but the evidence shows Ms. Washington is effectively a 50% partner. Your Honor, Moss objected, there was never any formal partnership agreement. My client's business is his alone. Because he convinced his wife to work for free by promising they would share everything, Jerome countered. A promise he is now breaking along with several others. The hearing continued for 3 hours. Brandon was called to testify, and Jerome's cross-examination was surgical. Brandon tried to maintain his composure, but his answers became increasingly defensive. "Mr. Anderson, you testified that you were the breadwinner in your marriage. Is that correct?" "Yes." "And yet your wife worked full-time for your company for 3 years without pay?" "She was helping out." "That's different." "Helping out 40 to 50 hours per week? Building systems that your company still uses today. I would have gotten to that eventually." "But you didn't?" "She did. And then after you hired employees to replace her work, your income increased substantially, correct?" "The business grew, yes." "Did your wife receive any ownership stake in the business she helped build?" "No." "Did she receive back pay for those 3 years of full-time work?" "It wasn't like that. We were married. What's mine was hers." Jerome paused, letting that statement hang in the air. "What's yours was hers." "Interesting philosophy, Mr. Anderson. Is that why you hid money in offshore accounts?" "Because what's yours was hers." Moss objected, but the damage was done. Judge Morrison sustained the objection, but Simone could see the skepticism on the judge's face. The worst moment for Brandon came when Jerome asked about Zoe. "Mr. Anderson, how often do you see your daughter?" "I've been busy with work and dealing with this divorce situation." "How often?" "I don't know exactly. According to phone records and your calendar, which we subpoenaed, you haven't seen your daughter in the 6 weeks since you moved out. Is that correct?" Brandon's jaw tightened. "Like I said, I've been dealing with a lot." "Too much to spend an hour with your own child?" "Objection," Moss called out. "Argumentative." "Sustained," Judge Morrison said, but she was looking at Brandon with clear disapproval. Jerome pulled out another document. "Mr. Anderson, I have here a text message from you to Tiffany Harrison from 3 weeks ago. Would you like me to read it?" Brandon's face went pale. "No." The message says, and I quote, "Dodged a bullet not putting myself on the birth certificate. Makes this whole thing cleaner. Except, Mr. Anderson, you are on your daughter's birth certificate. You signed it at the hospital. You had a DNA test done 2 years later that confirmed paternity. So what did you mean by this message?" Moss stood quickly. "Your Honor, my client needs a moment to consult with counsel." "I think we've heard enough for today," Judge Morrison said. "I'm going to order a full forensic accounting of all marital assets. I'm also ordering Mr. Anderson to pay temporary support of $5,000 per month until we reach a final settlement, and he is to have no contact with any marital assets or accounts. We'll reconvene in 30 days. As they left the courtroom, Jerome put a hand on Simone's shoulder. "That went even better than I expected." Simone looked back to see Brandon in heated discussion with his attorney. He caught her eye, and for a moment his mask of wounded dignity slipped. She saw raw anger there and something else. Fear. Good, she thought. You should be afraid. He had tried to take everything from her, tried to erase their daughter, tried to leave them with nothing. Now he was starting to understand that actions had consequences. The battle wasn't over, but the tide had turned. And Simone was just getting started. 3 weeks after the preliminary hearing, Simone sat in a coffee shop with her laptop open, reviewing her business plan for the dozenth time. The idea had come to her late one night as she lay awake thinking about everything Brandon had done. He had used her skills to build his business, then discarded her. But those skills hadn't disappeared. She still knew everything about operations management, systems design, financial planning. And she knew something else. She wasn't the only woman this had happened to. The more she researched, the more stories she found. Women who had helped build their husbands' businesses only to be left out of ownership. Women who had used their own money to fund their partner's dreams and then been told they had no claim. Women who had sacrificed their careers to support their families, only to find themselves financially vulnerable when marriages ended. Simone's business plan was simple. Restore Financial Consulting would help women recover from financial abuse and rebuild their economic independence. She would offer consulting on business formation, financial planning, asset protection, and rebuilding credit. She would charge on a sliding scale, making her services accessible to women at all income levels. The startup costs were minimal. She could work from home initially. Her first marketing would be through support groups and women's organizations. She had already reached out to 3 domestic violence shelters and 2 divorce support groups, offering free workshops on financial literacy and asset protection. Her first official client came from one of those workshops. Denise was a 42-year-old woman whose husband had emptied their bank accounts and fled the state. She arrived at Simone's dining room table with a garbage bag full of papers and a desperate need for help. "I don't even know where to start," Denise said, her hands shaking as she pulled out bank statements and bills. "He left me with nothing. I have 3 kids. I don't know how I'm going to keep the lights on." Simone took Denise's hands. "We're going to figure this out together. First, we're going to organize everything so we can see exactly where you stand. Then we're going to build a plan. You're not alone anymore." They spent 4 hours going through Denise's financial situation. Simone helped her set up a new bank account, showed her how to freeze her credit so her husband couldn't open new accounts in her name, and connected her with a legal aid attorney who could help with the divorce and child support. "You did all this for free?" Denise asked when they finished, tears in her eyes. "Right now I did," Simone said. "But I'm going to ask you to do something for me. When you're back on your feet, when you're financially stable again, I want you to help another woman the way I helped you today. Pass it forward." Denise nodded. "I promise." Word spread quickly through the support groups. Simone's second client came 2 days later. Then a third. Then a fourth. Within a month she had 10 clients. Some paid her consulting fees. Others could only afford to pay partial amounts. A few couldn't pay at all yet. Simone worked with all of them. What surprised her was how much she loved it. Every client who learned to understand their financial statements, every woman who successfully separated her finances from an abusive partner, every person who started their own business or went back to school. Each victory felt personal and powerful. Zoe noticed the change in her mother. "Mommy, you're smiling more," she said one morning over breakfast. Simone realized it was true. Despite the ongoing divorce battle, despite the stress and uncertainty, she was happy in a way she hadn't been in years. She was doing meaningful work. She was helping people. She was building something that was entirely hers. The business grew faster than she expected. 3 months in, she had 15 active clients and a waiting list. She hired her first employee, a recent finance graduate named Brittany who had watched her own mother struggle after divorce. Together they developed a more structured program with workshops, one-on-one consulting, and ongoing support groups. "You know what we need?" Brittany said one day as they were planning a workshop. "A website. Social media. We could reach so many more women if we had an online presence." Simone hesitated. Going public meant Brandon would know about her business. He would see that she was thriving without him. Part of her wanted to keep this separate, private. But a larger part of her realized that hiding her success was letting Brandon maintain power over her. He didn't deserve that power anymore. "Let's do it," Simone decided. "Full website. Social media presence. Let's tell the world what we're doing." They launched the Restore Financial Consulting website on a Tuesday morning. Simone had written the About page herself, sharing her story without mentioning Brandon by name. "I learned the hard way that financial abuse can happen to anyone. I lost assets I helped build, watched money disappear into hidden accounts, and faced a future where I was supposed to have nothing. But I had skills, determination, and a daughter who needed to see that you can rebuild. This business is for every woman who thought she was starting over with nothing. You have more than you think. We'll help you see it." The website went viral in financial abuse survivor communities. Simone's email inbox filled with messages from women across the country sharing their stories and asking for help. She couldn't serve everyone, but she started creating free resources. Downloadable guides on asset protection, videos on understanding financial statements, templates for financial planning. By month 5, Restore Financial Consulting had helped 43 women. Simone had hired 2 more consultants and moved the business into a small office space. The revenue wasn't huge yet, but it was growing steadily, and more importantly, it was all hers. One afternoon, Simone received an email that made her pause. It was from a reporter at a local business magazine, asking if she would be interested in being featured in their Rising Entrepreneurs series. "They want to interview you about building a business as a single mom," Brittany said excitedly. This could be huge publicity. Simone thought about it. Being in a magazine meant Brandon would definitely see it. His colleagues would see it. Tiffany would see it. Everyone who thought Simone would be broken by the divorce would see her succeeding. "Set up the interview," Simone said. The feature ran 2 weeks later with a photo of Simone in her office, professional and confident. The article titled "From Financial Abuse to Financial Freedom: How Simone Washington Built a Business Helping Others Rebuild," told her story and highlighted Restore Financial Consulting's impact. Jerome texted her a photo of the magazine. "Saw this in the waiting room at court. Brilliant timing. We have our final hearing next week. This shows you don't need Brandon. You've built something better without him." Simone looked at the magazine photo, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. She looked strong, capable, happy. Everything Brandon had tried to take from her, she had built back better. And they were just getting started. The final divorce hearing took place on a gray morning in late May, almost 8 months after Simone had discovered those papers on Brandon's desk. The courtroom was the same, but everything else had changed. Simone arrived with Jerome, her confidence evident in her posture. She wore a burgundy suit, her hair styled professionally, carrying herself like the successful businesswoman she had become. In the gallery sat several of her clients, there to support her. Brandon arrived looking significantly worse than he had at the preliminary hearing. He had lost weight, his suit hung loosely on his frame, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Tiffany was notably absent again. According to Jerome's sources, she had ended things with Brandon 2 months ago when she realized the condo and car would have to be returned as part of the settlement. Judge Morrison called the hearing to order. "We're here for final disposition in the matter of Anderson versus Anderson. I've reviewed all the evidence, depositions, and forensic accounting reports. Is there anything either counsel wishes to add before I rule?" Moss stood. "Your Honor, my client would like to address the court directly." Judge Morrison looked skeptical but nodded. "Mr. Anderson, you may speak." Brandon stood, and for a moment Simone saw a flash of the man she had married. The charming smile, the earnest expression. But it felt hollow now, a performance she could see straight through. "Your Honor, I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. I hurt my wife and I damaged my relationship with my daughter. I was selfish and I was wrong. But I'm asking for mercy. The forensic accounting is taking everything. I'll have nothing left. My business is failing. I've lost clients. My reputation is destroyed. I just want a chance to rebuild my life." He turned to look directly at Simone. "I'm sorry, Simone. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm asking anyway. We built something together once. We can both move forward with dignity if we just agree to be reasonable." Simone kept her expression neutral, but inside she felt nothing but cold contempt. He was still trying to manipulate her, still trying to make himself the victim. He hadn't mentioned Zoe once in his entire speech. It was all about him, his losses, his need to rebuild. Judge Morrison looked at Simone. "Ms. Washington, would you like to respond?" Simone stood slowly. She hadn't planned to speak, but suddenly she knew exactly what she needed to say. "Your Honor, my ex-husband is asking for mercy. He says he made mistakes. But calling what he did mistakes is like calling a hurricane a bad weather day. He systematically hid money. He committed fraud. He abandoned our daughter and tried to deny she was even his. Those aren't mistakes. Those are choices. Deliberate, calculated choices." Her voice remained steady, factual. "He says he wants to rebuild his life. I want him to have that chance. I want him to understand what it feels like to start over with nothing, the way he tried to leave me. I want him to experience the fear of not knowing how you'll support your child. I want him to feel the weight of consequences." She paused, then continued. "But this case isn't about revenge. It's about justice. It's about ensuring that what I helped build is fairly divided. It's about making sure my daughter is financially protected by a father who didn't want her. It's about setting a precedent that you can't abuse your family financially and walk away clean. Simone looked at Brandon. You asked if we could move forward with dignity. I am moving forward with dignity. I've built a business helping women recover from exactly what you did to me. I have clients, employees, purpose. I don't need your approval or your reconciliation. I just need what's legally mine and what's owed to our daughter. She sat down. The courtroom was silent. Judge Morrison reviewed her notes, then looked up. I'm going to be very clear about my findings. Mr. Anderson engaged in systematic financial abuse, fraudulent asset transfers, and parental abandonment. The evidence is overwhelming and undisputed. She began going through the division of assets point by point. The house went to Simone, with Brandon required to sign over the deed and reimburse her for the down payment she had provided. The savings account would be split 70-30 in Simone's favor, accounting for the money Brandon had stolen and hidden. Brandon had to return all funds from the offshore accounts and shell company within 30 days. Regarding the business, Judge Morrison continued, I find that Ms. Washington is entitled to 40% of its value based on her contributions to building it. She may take that as either partial ownership or as a cash buyout. Ms. Washington, which do you prefer? Cash buyout, Your Honor, Simone said immediately. She didn't want any continued connection to Brandon's business. Very well. Mr. Anderson will have 12 months to pay Ms. Washington $480,000, which represents her 40% share of the business valuation. Simone saw Brandon's face go white. That amount would essentially bankrupt him given his current financial situation. Regarding the minor child, Judge Morrison's voice hardened. Mr. Anderson, I have read your text messages. I have heard your testimony. I have noted your complete absence from your daughter's life during these proceedings. I find your behavior toward your child to be unconscionable. She paused, looking directly at Brandon. You are ordered to pay child support in the amount of $3,000 per month until the child reaches age 18 or graduates from high school, whichever is later. Additionally, you will establish an educational trust fund of $100,000 to be paid in full within 18 months. You are granted supervised visitation rights, which may be expanded if you demonstrate consistent engagement with your daughter over the next year. However, Ms. Washington will have sole legal and physical custody. Your Honor, Moss started to object. I'm not finished, Counselor. Mr. Anderson is also ordered to pay Ms. Washington's legal fees in full, which currently amount to $75,000. And I am making a specific finding for the record that Mr. Anderson engaged in fraudulent conduct during these proceedings, which may be used in any future legal actions. Judge Morrison closed her folder. Mr. Anderson, you came into this court asking to take everything from your wife and leave her with just your daughter, as if your child was some kind of consolation prize. Instead, you're leaving with very little, and you have no one to blame but yourself. Your choices brought you here. I suggest you spend time reflecting on what kind of father and man you want to be going forward. She struck her gavel. Divorce granted. This court is adjourned. Simone sat still for a moment, letting it sink in. It was over. The legal battle was finished. She had won not just in terms of assets and money, but in vindication. The court had seen exactly what Brandon was and had ruled accordingly. Jerome squeezed her shoulder. Congratulations. Complete victory. Across the courtroom, Brandon was in heated discussion with his attorney. As Simone gathered her things to leave, Brandon caught her eye. There was no charm now, no manipulation. Just defeat and barely contained anger. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it. What was there to say? The judge had laid out his failures in excruciating detail. Everyone in that courtroom knew exactly what he had done and what he deserved. Simone walked out of the courthouse into the sunlight, her clients surrounding her with hugs and congratulations. She pulled out her phone and called Zoe's school. Hi, this is Zoe Anderson's mother. I'm going to pick her up early today. We're going to celebrate. Everything okay? The school secretary asked. Simone smiled. Everything is perfect. The first few weeks after the divorce was finalized had a strange quality, like waking up from a long nightmare. Simone kept expecting something to go wrong, some last-minute appeal or legal maneuver from Brandon. But Jerome assured her it was truly over. He has no grounds for appeal, Jerome explained over coffee one morning. His own actions were so well documented that any appeals court would laugh it out. He knows it too. His attorney has already withdrawn from any further involvement. The financial settlement started coming through in stages. Brandon sold one of the cars to make the first payment toward the business buyout. The offshore accounts were seized and returned. The house deed was transferred to Simone's name alone. Each transaction was another piece of her life reclaimed. Meanwhile, Brandon's world continued to unravel. His business, already damaged by client departures and his reputation, was now additionally strained by the financial obligations of the divorce. According to mutual acquaintances, he had been forced to lay off most of his employees and was operating out of a tiny shared office space instead of the premium downtown suite he once occupied. Simone felt no sympathy. She remembered too clearly how he had planned to leave her with nothing. How he had called Zoe a burden. How he had systematically stolen from their marriage to build a life with someone else. What surprised her was how little she thought about him now. The months of legal battle had felt all-consuming, but now that it was over, Brandon seemed to fade to irrelevance. She was too busy building her actual life to waste energy on his failures. Restore Financial Consulting continued to grow. The magazine feature had brought in a flood of new clients and several speaking invitations. Simone found herself presenting at women's conferences, financial literacy workshops, and business development seminars. Each time she shared her story, women would approach her afterward with their own experiences of financial abuse. "Thank you for showing us it's possible to rebuild," one woman told her after a presentation. "My husband told me I'd be nothing without him. Seeing you prove that wrong gives me hope." Those moments made everything worthwhile. Every early morning, every late night working on the business, every difficult client situation. It all mattered because she was creating real change in people's lives. 6 months post-divorce, Simone made a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary. She was going to buy a new house. The current house held too many memories of Brandon, too many ghosts of the life she had thought they were building. Zoe deserved a fresh start in a place that was entirely theirs. She found a beautiful craftsman-style home in a family-friendly neighborhood with excellent schools. It had a big backyard with an old oak tree perfect for climbing, a sunroom that would make a perfect home office, and enough space for Zoe to have her own playroom. It was smaller than the house Brandon had tried to steal, but it felt warmer, more like home. The day they moved in, Simone and Zoe planted a garden together in the backyard. "We're putting down roots," Simone explained to her daughter. "Making this place ours." Zoe, now 7 and becoming more aware of the changes in their family, asked, "Is Daddy ever going to live with us again?" Simone knelt down to her daughter's level. "No, sweetheart. Daddy and I are going to live in different houses now. But you know what? We're going to make this house full of love and happiness. Just us girls." "And maybe a dog?" Zoe asked hopefully. Simone laughed. "We'll see about that." They did end up getting a dog, a rescue golden retriever mix that Zoe named Honey. The dog became a source of joy and comfort for both of them, another living being who depended on them and loved them unconditionally. Brandon made sporadic attempts to re-enter their lives. He would text asking to see Zoe, then cancel at the last minute. He sent emails suggesting they co-parent more effectively, which Jerome translated as, "He wants you to be flexible with child support payments." He even showed up at Restore Financial Consulting once, asking to speak with Simone about moving forward together. Brittany, who answered the door, told him firmly that Simone was with a client and all communication needed to go through her attorney. Brandon left, but not before trying to explain that he had learned and grown, and wanted another chance. Simone heard about it afterward and felt nothing but relief that she hadn't been there. She had no interest in Brandon's apologies or growth. Whether he became a better person or not was no longer her concern. She had moved on completely. The supervised visitation sessions that the court had ordered were sporadic at best. Brandon would show up for a few weeks, spend awkward hours at a family center with Zoe under supervision, then disappear again for a month. Zoe stopped asking about him. She had built a life that didn't include waiting for her father to show up. Tiffany, the woman who had helped destroy Simone's marriage, had disappeared from Brandon's life entirely. Simone heard through the grapevine that Tiffany had moved to another state and was engaged to someone else. The woman had apparently decided that being with Brandon came with more consequences than benefits. One afternoon, Simone ran into Brandon's mother at the grocery store. The older woman looked uncomfortable, clearly wanting to avoid interaction. But Simone pushed her cart over. "Hello, Mrs. Anderson." "Simone," the woman said stiffly. "How are you?" "Thriving, actually. How's Brandon?" The question was genuine. Despite everything, Simone had no interest in Brandon suffering endlessly. She just wanted him to face appropriate consequences and leave her alone. "He's managing," Mrs. Anderson said carefully. "The business has been difficult. He's working on rebuilding." "I hope he succeeds," Simone said and meant it. As long as he keeps paying child support on time and doesn't try to interfere in our lives, I want him to do well. Mrs. Anderson looked surprised. Really? Really? I don't need him to fail to prove I can succeed. I'm doing that just fine on my own. She said goodbye and continued her shopping, leaving Brandon's mother looking thoughtful. The truth was, Simone had learned something important through this whole experience. The opposite of love wasn't hate. It was indifference. She had moved past anger and pain to a place where Brandon simply didn't matter to her anymore. He was just the father of her child, someone she had to coordinate child support and supervised visits with, but not someone who had any emotional hold on her. That indifference was the ultimate freedom. He had tried to destroy her, and instead she had built something better. He had tried to take everything and she had created more. He was stuck in the past, still trying to justify his choices, while she was building a future. One evening, as Simone was reading to Zoe before bed, her daughter interrupted the story. "Mommy, are you happy?" Simone looked at her daughter, at their cozy room in their new house, at the life they had built together. "Yes, baby. I really truly am." "Me too," Zoe said, snuggling closer. "This is better." And it was. Every part of it was better. 15 months after the divorce was finalized, Simone stood in front of a room full of entrepreneurs at a women's business conference. The banner behind her read, "Building Wealth, Reclaiming Power, a Financial Empowerment Summit." Restore Financial Consulting had evolved beyond anything Simone had initially imagined. What started as her helping a few women navigate divorce settlements had grown into a full-service financial empowerment firm with 3 divisions: divorce recovery consulting, business formation and funding for women entrepreneurs, and financial education workshops. The company now had 15 employees across 2 office locations. Brittany had been promoted to Director of Client Services. They had helped over 200 women rebuild their financial lives. The business was profitable, sustainable, and making a real difference. But more than the numbers, what mattered to Simone was the impact. She had women reach out to her months or years after working together to share their successes. "I bought my first house. I started my own business. I went back to school. I left my abusive partner and I'm financially independent." Those messages sustained her through the long hours and difficult moments. The speaking invitation to the business conference had come from a major women's entrepreneurship organization. They wanted Simone to share her journey from financial abuse victim to successful business owner. The audience included aspiring entrepreneurs, established business owners, and investors looking for companies to support. Simone had prepared extensively for this presentation. It was the biggest speaking engagement of her career and she wanted to get it right. "Good morning," she began, her voice strong and clear. "My name is Simone Washington, and I'm the founder and CEO of Restore Financial Consulting. Today I want to talk about building a business from the ashes of betrayal." She told her story honestly. Not the sanitized version but the real one. Finding the divorce papers. Discovering the affair. Learning about the hidden money. Realizing her husband had planned to leave her destitute while abandoning their daughter. "I had every reason to give up," Simone said. "I had a 6-year-old daughter, no income, and a soon-to-be ex-husband who had stolen our savings and was determined to take everything else. I could have accepted defeat. Instead, I chose to fight. Not just for what I was owed legally but for my own future." She walked the audience through building Restore Financial Consulting. The first client. The first dollar earned. The first employee hired. The challenges of running a business while going through a difficult divorce. The decision to go public with her story despite knowing it would invite judgment. "People told me I was too angry to build a business. That I needed to heal first, focus on myself. But building this business was how I healed. Every client I helped was proof that what happened to me could be transformed into something meaningful. Every woman who left my office with a plan and hope was evidence that I had value beyond what my ex-husband saw in me." The audience was completely silent, engaged with every word. Simone showed slides about the business's growth. The revenue charts going steadily upward. The client testimonials. The expansion plans. Then she shifted to the broader impact. Financial abuse is one of the least discussed forms of domestic abuse, but it's incredibly common. Studies show that 99% of domestic violence cases include financial abuse. Abusers use money to control, manipulate, and trap their victims. And when those relationships end, victims often have nothing. No savings. Damaged credit. Sometimes even debt they didn't create. She explained how Restore Financial Consulting addressed these issues through practical education, personalized consulting, and community support. She shared success stories while protecting client privacy. One of my clients came to me with $17,000 in debt her ex-husband had racked up in her name. She was working 2 jobs just to make minimum payments. We helped her dispute the fraudulent charges, negotiate with creditors, and file a police report for identity theft. 18 months later, her credit score has improved by 200 points and she's debt-free. That's what we do. We help people reclaim their financial futures. After the presentation, during the networking portion of the conference, Simone was approached by several people, including a woman in her mid-50s wearing an expensive suit. Ms. Washington, I'm Patricia Chin, managing partner at Summit Equity Partners. Do you have a moment to talk? They found a quiet corner. Patricia pulled out a business card. I was impressed by your presentation. More than that, I'm impressed by what you've built. How do you feel about scaling nationally? Simone blinked. Scaling? Your model is replicable. Every major city has women who need these services. With proper funding and infrastructure, you could open offices in 10-20 cities within 2 years. We'd like to discuss investment opportunities. This was beyond anything Simone had imagined. She had been focused on serving her local community well. The idea of going national was both exciting and intimidating. I'd need to think about that carefully, Simone said. This business is very personal to me. I'd want to make sure we maintain quality and mission focus even while growing. Patricia smiled. That's exactly the kind of thoughtful response I hoped for. Think about it. Review our portfolio. When you're ready, let's have a more detailed conversation. Simone left the conference with a folder full of business cards, several potential partnerships, and Patricia's investment proposal to review. Her mind was spinning with possibilities. That evening, she sat in her home office reviewing everything while Zoe did homework at the kitchen table. Honey was sprawled across Simone's feet, providing warm companionship. Through the window, she could see the garden she and Zoe had planted, now flourishing with vegetables and flowers. This was success. Not just the business opportunities or the financial stability, but the peace. The quiet joy of a Thursday evening at home with her daughter. The satisfaction of work that mattered. The freedom to make choices based on what she wanted, not what someone else demanded. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jerome. Saw your name trending on business Twitter. You're famous now. She checked and found dozens of tweets about her conference presentation. Women sharing their own stories of financial abuse. Entrepreneurs praising her business model. Investors expressing interest in companies like hers. One tweet stood out. Simone Washington built an empire from the wreckage of her marriage. That's not revenge. That's resurrection. Simone saved that tweet. It captured exactly how she felt. She had been knocked down, had faced someone trying to destroy her completely, and she had not just survived. She had thrived. She had taken her pain and transformed it into purpose. Brandon was somewhere out there, probably still struggling to rebuild his business and reputation. She genuinely hoped he was doing better, learning from his mistakes, being a better person. But his journey was no longer connected to hers. She had built her own empire, created her own success, defined her own worth, and she was just getting started. 2 years after the divorce, Simone stood backstage at a women's empowerment conference in Chicago. Through the curtain, she could see the auditorium filling with over 1,000 attendees. Her stomach fluttered with nervous energy, but it was the good kind of nervousness, anticipation rather than fear. In the front row, she spotted Zoe sitting with Brittany. Her daughter was 8 years old now, confident and vibrant. She wore a "My Mom is a Boss" t-shirt that Brittany had bought her, and she was chatting animatedly with the people around her, completely comfortable in a room full of strangers. Seeing Zoe there, proud and secure, made everything Simone had been through worthwhile. The host, a renowned women's business advocate, was introducing her. Our next speaker built a multimillion-dollar business from nothing while going through one of the most difficult periods of her life. She turned her pain into purpose and now helps hundreds of women each year reclaim their financial independence. Please welcome Simone Washington, founder and CEO of Restore Financial Consulting. Simone walked onto the stage to enthusiastic applause. She waited for it to die down, then began. I want to tell you about the worst moment of my life, she said. The audience quieted, leaning in. I found divorce papers my husband had left on his desk. He was demanding our house, our cars, our savings, my family heirlooms, everything we had built together. But what broke me wasn't the list of assets he wanted. It was what wasn't on the list. Our 6-year-old daughter. He didn't want custody. Didn't want visitation. He literally told his mistress that our child was a burden and not part of his future plans. She paused, letting the weight of that sink in. In that moment, I had 2 choices. I could let that rejection define me and my daughter, or I could use it as fuel to build something better. I chose to build. Over the next 45 minutes, Simone shared her journey. Not just the business success but the emotional healing. Not just the legal victory but the internal transformation. She talked about the nights she cried herself to sleep, the mornings she forced herself to get up anyway. The moment she realized that the best revenge wasn't destroying Brandon, but becoming so successful that his opinion became irrelevant. Here's what I learned, Simone said, her voice strong. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference built on self-worth. My ex-husband tried to make me believe I was nothing without him. He wanted me to accept scraps and be grateful. Instead, I proved that I was everything he claimed to be and more. And I did it while being a present, loving mother to the daughter he threw away. She shared statistics about financial abuse, tools for recognizing it, and resources for escaping it. She talked about the importance of financial literacy, separate accounts, and credit monitoring. She explained how women could protect themselves legally while building businesses or careers. But she also talked about something deeper. Self-worth that wasn't dependent on anyone else's validation. My business has been successful beyond my wildest dreams. We've expanded to 12 cities. We've helped over 500 women rebuild their financial lives. We've trained consultants and developed programs. We have investors backing our national expansion. All of that is wonderful and I'm proud of it. Simone paused, her eyes finding Zoe in the audience. But my real success is that little girl in the front row. She knows she is loved unconditionally. She knows she is valuable simply because she exists. She has watched her mother face the worst betrayal and come out stronger. She has seen that you don't need someone else to complete you. You can be whole on your own. That's the legacy I'm building. Not just a business, but a daughter who will never accept being treated as less than she deserves. The audience erupted in applause. Several women were crying. Simone saw Zoe beaming, giving her a double thumbs up. After the presentation, during the meet and greet session, woman after woman approached Simone with their stories. A teacher who had been married to a man who controlled every penny. A doctor whose husband had racked up gambling debts in her name. A young mother who had been told she was too stupid to manage money. Each one thanked Simone for showing them a path forward. One woman, probably in her late 60s, waited until the end. I've been divorced for 30 years, she said quietly. My ex-husband did similar things to what yours did. I survived, but I never thrived. I was too angry, too bitter. Seeing you succeed, seeing you genuinely happy, it makes me realize I could have made different choices. Thank you for showing what's possible. Simone hugged her. It's never too late. You survived and that took strength. Give yourself credit for that. That evening, Simone and Zoe had dinner at a nice restaurant near the conference venue. It was a rare treat, a chance to celebrate together. Mommy, all those people wanted to talk to you, Zoe said, eyes wide with amazement. You're like famous. Simone laughed. I wouldn't say famous. But I'm helping people and that makes me happy. Daddy never helped people, Zoe said matter-of-factly. She rarely mentioned Brandon anymore. The supervised visitations had tapered off to nothing after Brandon moved to another state 6 months ago. He sent child support payments on time. Jerome had made sure the court order included automatic wage garnishment, but he had made no effort to maintain a relationship with his daughter. Simone had been worried about how this would affect Zoe, had even taken her to a child therapist to help process the abandonment. But Zoe was remarkably well-adjusted. She had friends, hobbies, and a mother who was present and engaged. Brandon's absence left a gap, but it wasn't a gaping wound. Your daddy made choices that hurt us, Simone said carefully. But those were his choices, not anything wrong with you. You are smart, kind, talented, and loved. His inability to see that is his loss, not yours. I know, Mommy. You tell me all the time. Zoe took a bite of her pasta, then added, I'm glad it's just us. And honey. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. Later that night, back at their hotel room, Simone tucked Zoe into bed and sat down with her laptop. She pulled up the investment proposal from Patricia Chen's firm. After months of negotiations, they had reached terms Simone was comfortable with. Summit Equity Partners would invest $5 million in Restore Financial Consulting in exchange for 30% ownership. Simone would retain majority control and full operational authority. With that funding, they could open offices in 20 new cities, hire 50 consultants, and develop digital tools to serve women across the country. They could partner with domestic violence shelters, legal aid organizations, and women's business centers. They could scale their impact exponentially. It was everything Simone had dreamed of, and more than she had dared to imagine when she first sat down at her dining room table with that first client. She signed the agreement and sent it back to Patricia. A new message popped up in her email. It was from Brandon. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" Simone hesitated, her cursor hovering over the message. For a moment she was tempted to delete it unread. But curiosity won out. She opened it. "Simone, I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I know I destroyed our marriage and failed as a father. I've been in therapy for the past year working on understanding why I made the choices I did. I'm not making excuses, but I want you to know I understand now how badly I hurt you and Zoe. I'm writing to ask if there's any chance we could co-parent more effectively. I want to be part of Zoe's life, but I understand if you don't trust me. I also want to say that I saw your conference presentation online. I'm proud of what you've built. You're an amazing person, and I was a fool to not see that when we were together. I don't want anything from you. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and I hope you and Zoe are happy." Simone read it twice. She tried to detect manipulation or ulterior motives, but the message seemed genuine. Brandon sounded like a man who had finally faced his own failures. She closed the laptop without responding. Maybe she would reply eventually, maybe she wouldn't. Right now it didn't matter. Whether Brandon found redemption or continued struggling was his journey to take. She had her own path and it was leading somewhere beautiful. She looked over at Zoe, sleeping peacefully with honey curled at her feet. This was what mattered. This peaceful moment. This hard-won happiness. This life she had built from nothing. Brandon had demanded everything in their divorce, except their daughter. He had seen Zoe as worthless, as a burden to be discarded. But Zoe had been the reason Simone fought so hard. The motivation to rebuild. The reminder of what real love looked like. In trying to take everything, Brandon had given Simone the greatest gift. Freedom to become exactly who she was meant to be. He had tried to destroy her, and instead had pushed her to discover strengths she didn't know she had. Simone had taken her revenge, though not in the way Brandon probably feared. She hadn't tried to ruin his life or make him suffer. She had simply built a better life without him. She had succeeded so thoroughly that his opinion became meaningless. She had become so strong that his rejection couldn't touch her. That was the truest form of victory. Not vengeance but transcendence. Simone turned off the light and crawled into bed. Tomorrow they would fly home. She had client meetings, staff reviews, and an interview with a national business magazine. Zoe had school, soccer practice, and a birthday party to attend. Their lives were full and rich and entirely theirs. As she drifted off to sleep, Simone thought about that woman at the conference, the one who had survived but never thrived. She hoped her story would help that woman and countless others realize it was never too late to choose happiness. Because that was the real secret, the truth Simone had learned through pain and rebuilding. Happiness wasn't something someone else gave you or took away. It was something you built yourself, piece by piece, choice by choice, day by day. And Simone's happiness was just beginning.